and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, he keeps playing 50 Cent's PIMP on repeat. It's Matt Friedman. How's it going, Matt?
It's how I relax, listening to super loud acoustic versions of rap songs.
I don't know where they got, do you think it was a licensing thing where if they played the version with the lyrics that they would have to pay more money?
No, I think it was an intentional artistic choice because
He just has an acoustic version of PIMP.
That's who this guy is.
Of course, Samuel.
Yeah.
This week on the show, it is part 7 in our ongoing series, taking a look at the 10 Best Picture nominees just in time for the 2024 Oscars. This week, we're taking a look at the French film nominated for Best Picture, Anatomy of a Fall. I have so much to say about this movie, Matt, and I think this can be a really interesting episode. But there's something else I want to talk to you about on this episode after we finish this movie, though.
All right.
It's my favorite topic.
Uh-huh.
It's the internet and online discourse.
Yeah, I like to talk about that too.
Specifically around the newest series that just wrapped up on HBO last week, True Detective Night Country, a 6-part, the 4th season of True Detective that caused some discourse, and I have to vent to you about it, Matt. And I know you are the perfect person to vent about this because it's one of those conversations where I just know you're going to agree with me, and therefore I just get to talk to you about it and just have you say yeah, yeah, and it'll make me feel better. It'll make you feel good, and then everyone will love it.
That's my favorite kind of conversation, when the other person doesn't talk.
I think you will have things to say. I was just kidding.
Okay.
But we will get into that in a little bit. First, we have to talk about this week's main movie, Anatomy of a Fall.
I don't know what happened. I think he fell off that 3rd floor. The window's open.
The autopsy report is inconclusive. An accidental fall is going to be hard for us to defend. That's why there's an investigation for a more suspicious death, because you were the only person there. And of course, you're his wife.
Stop. I did not kill him.
That's not the point.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A woman is suspected of murder after her husband's death, and their partially sighted son faces a moral dilemma as the main witness.
This movie was written by Arthur Harari and Justine Triet. It is directed by Justine. I said the E there, or the T there, Matt, and I realized as I said it was wrong. Justine Triet, probably. Triet. She's French.
Who knows, man? I mean, maybe. I guess she's French. She's probably French.
Yeah, it stars Sandra Hüller, and was nominated for just a bunch of awards, Matt. Of course, it was nominated for Best Picture, but on top of that, Justine Triet got Best Director. Only, I think, the 5th or 6th woman ever nominated for that category. Got Best Actress for Sandra Hüller, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Editing. So this is a very, very well-received film that did very well in the nominations. So let's talk about it. Matt, what did you think of Anatomy of a Fall?
I like this movie a lot. I'm glad we watched it. I will say this is the first where I've been like, this one's not going to be Best Picture, 100%. And not because I hated it or anything. It's just like, actually, to tell you the truth, I kept vacillating as the movie went on between, I don't even see why this was nominated, and wow, this movie is genius. And that was weird because usually you only feel one of those two ways,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know what that is exactly. I think it might have had to do with pacing, but it's also possible that I might feel even more so that the movie is genius on a second viewing, because the first viewing you don't necessarily fully understand what the movie is doing and what it's about. And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. Obviously, is what the movie is actually about.
Absolutely.
And how it works. What did you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie a whole lot too. I think this is a movie that starts off all right, and then gets better as it goes. By the time, so I can understand why you felt that way, because the first half hour or so, I was like, really, this movie? And then I think it just keeps getting better and better from there. And I think it ends on something really fascinating that I do want to spend a lot of time talking to you about. I do think we have one thing we have to do here at the beginning. We have to get this out of the way because the movie is not actually about this, but we do have to talk about it. And that is the French criminal justice system and trial court shenanigans. This is very difficult to talk about because neither of us are lawyers, first and foremost. And also neither of us are French, and we don't have the knowledge of how the French criminal justice system works to know if the courtroom sequences in this movie reflect how trial law is actually practiced in France. But if so, holy shit.
Yeah, if so, I'm never going to France. So it's funny because while there's a lot to this movie, I think most of you and my conversation about the movie offline has been about the French court and how it's like so many things. Like there doesn't seem to be anything like the idea of the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know if there is or not, but the way the movie works, it's like, we're just gonna mention this. In her book, she wrote about a woman who thinks about killing her husband for a second. Yeah. And
so jury, what do you think about that?
Yeah, what do you think about that? And they yelled at each other one time. Yeah. And it's.
I think it's important to say that the majority of our understanding of how the United States criminal justice system works, at least when it comes to trials and courtrooms, is from movies and television, which is probably not 100% accurate either. But I do know like enough about like burdens of proof and how this stuff works and the concept of discovery as it works in United States law that like there's just no way you could say half of the shit that they say in this movie in a courtroom in the US and not like immediately be told to shut up and possibly be held in contempt of court.
Yeah.
Like there's a sequence in this movie where they play an audio tape of the two of them having a big fight the day before the death happens. And there is a physical altercation that happens, but all we have is an audio clip. And then some guy gets on the stand and is like, well, clearly she was the angrier one. And so she must have done the physical altercation. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Like, you can't say that in a courtroom. You have no idea. Like, are you an expert? Like, what? Like, it's none of the things that you would expect in a like, I was screaming objection at my TV like 20 times because I'm like, there's no way a defense attorney would let someone be like, well, clearly this fight and the murder are related. Oh, really? How do you know that? How do you know that?
Right.
Like, what is that just conjecture? Like, yeah, it seems like in this courtroom, like there are times when the lawyers complain, right? But it is like after the fact, like, I don't agree with how this went down.
Yeah.
And I think you're like, I'm gonna like destroy your testimony after the fact, where like and I feel like in a US court it would just be like, no, you're not even allowed to present these things as part of your case.
Right.
Absolutely not.
And it seems like the judge always sides with whoever's pulling the ridiculous bullshit. And will be like, stop interrupting. I want to hear this juicy gossip. So I agree. I mean, we could go on in this vein and it might be fun to do so somewhat, but like, I think the way the court works in this particular movie is vital to what the movie is actually doing.
Yes.
Whether or not this is how French courts actually work, because it ends up being this analysis of how we like peep into other people's relationships and judge them. And we don't, and we can't really ever know or understand the full texture of the situation. And I thought it was very intentional that the movie is constructed such that the viewer never actually knows whether she pushed him out the window or not.
Mm-hmm.
We never actually see the act of whether he jumps or whether she hits him. We intentionally don't see anything that happens in the house for the whole period of time after the boy leaves to the time the boy comes back. We never really know. We never even even the audio recording you just mentioned, we don't see a flashback. We see a flashback of part of that, but we don't see a flashback to the part where somebody is being hit, and she says he's hitting himself in the face and head out of frustration and rage, but we don't know that, and we really do, So the whole movie becomes this Rorschach blot where it's like when she breaks down crying in the car. Why is she crying exactly? Is
Yeah,
she crying
yeah.
because, is it just the stress of this wrongful conviction? Is it the guilt over what she's putting her son through? Is it the guilt over the fact that she killed her husband? Could very well be. And I mean, I just transiently, just for a second, thought about jokingly pretending for this entire conversation with you that I was convinced that she did do it, just because I thought that would be funny. But the fact is, I don't think she did it, but neither do I feel convinced that she didn't.
Yeah.
And I think the movie wants you to walk away meditating on this idea of like, look at these scanty little shreds of clue based on like, she didn't seem very sad when she said that.
Yeah.
And then you assemble this theory of like, oh yeah, she's a murderer. It's so interesting to introspect on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the complicated nature of relationships, and yeah, this idea that you look at it from the outside and you try to gather the complexities of this relationship from hard evidence and clues and ideas and thoughts about things, but it's so much deeper and more confusing than that. That like the fights between the two of them, I think my favorite sequence in the whole movie, and frankly I think that the sequence that got Sandra Hüller nominated, was the audio tape sequence where you are right, we don't get to see the actual physical altercation. It cuts back to the courtroom before that, but that is like the one sequence that we get to actually see the husband in, because he's basically not in the movie the entire time until this one flashback sequence where we're seeing the audio conversation they had. And she's incredible in there, and like just the complicated nature of like these two people that come together, that both have their own dreams and desires and wants, and also want things collectively, but also want things for themselves, and the way in which life and the complicated choices we make and choices that we feel are foisted upon us just mess everything up. And it's like, it is really interesting watching this movie coming off of Past Lives, like where Past Lives last week is a movie we talked about how there's these two different kind of loves available here, like this one that is real and mundane and beautiful in its own way, and then this beautiful tapestry created of this love that I'll never have. And then here we have, oh, this is like a relationship. Like this is just, and it's not a good relationship. It's not a healthy relationship. They don't seem, I don't know how much they love each other anymore at this point, but they did at some point, like they came together at some point. And I love the idea of the Anatomy of a Fall as both a literal title and then a more metaphorical title of like the fall of this relationship, the fall of this marriage, the fall of love.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly was more literal than I expected it to be, but yes, it is also metaphorical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read somewhere a long time ago that every relationship argument is fundamentally an argument about who is giving more, and fairness. And so that makes the fundamental root of their argument very universal and relatable to anyone who's been in a relationship and had a disagreement, even if you've never had the specific argument about like, oh, we moved because of your job, or you made a mistake and our child was injured. Like, these are all things that happen to everyone at some point, sort of, right? In the sense that like people are always having to make what they perceive to be a sacrifice in order for the relationship to work. And so that made, and like, I agree with you that like the scene of their argument was, so fantastically well acted, because like both characters are totally convinced of their worldview, and you aren't. Like, you might have your own personal bias in terms of who you identify with more, but you can sort of see the other person's point of view.
Yeah. Well, we don't get to see the history of any of this, right? So like we're kind of catching up with them as they go, and so it makes it so, yeah, I mean, you could possibly try to take a side if you want to, but like I don't feel like I have enough information to take a side. Like there's moments where I'm like, oh, it seems like that was a really fucked up thing to do, actually, taking his story, and like, yeah, maybe he like told you could, but but still, like, just like pouncing on his idea because you liked it, and then he's obviously not cool with that. Like, I could see that, but then also it's like, yeah, you're definitely like making excuses. It's just it's complicated, and
Yeah.
yeah, like the final verdict of the movie, is she actually guilty or not? Like, who is responsible or not responsible for the failure of their marriage? Like, both, neither, like,
Yeah.
all of the above. Like, it is intentionally ambiguous in this really fascinating way,
Yeah.
that I think makes it just fun to watch. Because, yeah, you like, I think when you see two people arguing on a screen, like, you want to take a side, right? Or you want to be told which side is the right side,
Right.
because it makes you feel good about how you feel, and the
Right.
movie never lets you do that.
Yeah, that I agree. I mean, that's exactly right. I feel like in any other movie of this nature, you would have seen like, oh God, he's such a tedious asshole. Like he's dragging her down. She's obviously the hero, the long suffering hero here, and
Yeah.
she's being unfairly maligned. But it's like, no, I mean, even if you think he's wrong, it's not like he's totally irrational.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's totally groundless, especially because her sort of response to him is so sort of unyieldingly inflexible. But like you said, we're seeing a tiny slice of this, and that's what she keeps
Yeah.
saying. Like, to the movie's good about not being too overt, and keeping things at the level of implication. But there are a few moments where the movie does kind of tell us its theme, and basically it has her say, like, you can't judge our whole marriage based on that thing that was overheard in that snippet of
Yeah,
conversation.
that one
and
argument. Yeah, that one argument we had. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, as you said, because arguments are about, like, so often not actually about the thing literally being argued about in that moment. They're about
Yeah.
the 100 things underneath it that we're not even talking about, but are still there in the argument and influence the argument. Yeah. And I mean, the thing that underscores this whole thing is the Daniel character, right? Which I think at the end of the day, the movie almost seems completely unconcerned whether or not not only do we not get to know whether she's actually guilty or innocent, but it's almost like whether or not she's acquitted or found guilty by the court is of secondary importance to whether her son thinks she did it or not. Like,
Yeah.
that seems to be the crux of this whole thing, is what Daniel thinks happened, and what he allows, like, what conclusion he allows himself to come to, but about what happened between his parents. And we meet this character. He's not completely blind, but mostly blind. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we ever actually learn what the accident was that blinded him.
Yeah, I think what they said was, he was crossing the street with
Oh, okay.
the babysitter, and he was hit by a motorcycle. I believe.
Okay, I missed that.
Yeah, well, it's easy to miss stuff because of the subtitles. the switching between English and French. Well, that's one thing I wanted to talk about. So let's just put a pin in that for a second.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you mentioned in there, you said the idea of the acquittal being irrelevant. I've never seen like a courtroom drama that put less emphasis on the moment of the verdict being revealed. It's just like it literally skipped over. It's just like, we find out, like, I was almost confused when it was revealed. I was like, oh, she was acquitted. Oh, like you're catching up to the movie, and it just blows past it. There's no moment of catharsis accompanying that at all. And I think it's just like you said, it's because it's like, we're not, well, it's two things. It's what you just said about it being much more concerned with the Daniel character and what he thinks. And number two, it's hard to continue to sustain the ambiguity of, did she kill him or not, if we're hanging on the question of the acquittal, because you kind of have to know which way you want the verdict to go.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it's actually interesting to imagine, like, what would we have felt if we had been waiting for the acquittal, for the verdict to be read, because I was like, I was honestly like, this could go either way. This is the most could go either way courtroom drama movie I've ever seen. I could totally see this movie ending either way and making some kind of valid point either way. Yeah, I thought that was remarkable.
But ultimately, I loved the way it did end, making it about Daniel and making it, his decision and his testimony at the end, which I think because it's kind of the last thing we see before we see the acquittal, is like, in my mind, meant to convey that, like, was the reason why the acquittal happened. That, like, oh, Daniel believes that his father committed suicide. And because Daniel believes that, or should I say, Daniel allows himself to believe that. I mean, that is one of the interesting things we're talking about in this movie, right? The idea of what is truth, what is belief, like is truth, or is truth the truth that you tell yourself? And like, I think the line he specifically says is, I can't see, when I look at the situation, the two possibilities, I can't see my mom having done this. I can see my dad having done this a little bit. And therefore I have to just make a choice and make a decision and say, like, because of that, then I choose to believe that it is the one that in my mind makes a little bit more sense. And that's awful, but that's like, in a world where we're just not going to know things, in a world where, like, from the Daniel perspective, like, your parents very, very well, but you also don't know your parents at all. And you don't even know the intricacies and complicated mess that is their relationship and their interactions with each other, and the love there, but also the hate and all these things. And you have to just, for yourself, come to a decision, come to a conclusion.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's like you just have to decide. You don't have to pretend, but you do have to decide. I like that articulation. I'm just going to briefly dip my toe back into the courtroom drama aspect, or the courtroom where he does this little science experiment by feeding the dog the medicine.
Yeah.
And the prosecutor is like, this little science experiment proves nothing. And I was like, dude, nothing you said in this whole trial proves anything. There's there's not even a gesture at the concept of proof. The closest thing that even approached proof in this trial was the forensic analysis of the blood spatter, which was ultimately, like, totally neutral.
Yeah, because they had another forensic analyst come out and say the opposite thing. So
yeah. Right. And it's just like, which one of these two analysts do you like better, basically?
Yeah.
And I thought that was funny, because it's like, yeah, I mean, in an American courtroom, there's no evidence that she killed him at all.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even be a question.
They might not. I mean, they might not even indict in an American courtroom, because a DA would look at this and be like, "There's no way. There's no way." Yeah.
Yeah. What was the other thing I was going to talk about? Oh, the language. The language.
Yeah.
I thought it was super interesting how. So this is like okay, actually, maybe you know more than me. Like, this is a French movie.
Yes.
That was made in France. That was released in France.
Yes.
Do you know whether they did the, half of the movie being in English so that it would play better in the US, or was this more of a stylistic choice? Because I could see the answer being either one. And I don't know the answer.
Well, so this movie premiered at Cannes. So, Cannes is in France, and the French, they don't like us very much. I think it was. I mean, you could probably argue the former, but I think it was mostly the latter. Like, one thing I did read is that Sandra Hüller, she's a German woman, she's a German actress. She doesn't speak great French. And when she got cast for this movie, Justin Triet and Arthur Harari wrote this movie for her. They had her in mind when they wrote the film, because they had worked with her on a previous movie as well. And she said, "Okay, for this one, I want to speak French. It's in France. I want to speak French." And Justine Triet basically said, "No. The language and communication and the confusion that creates is part of what I'm doing here." So yeah, this idea that, you have these two different languages happening, people are forced to speak in languages they're not comfortable with. The idea of the language and communication being this limiting factor, or this confusing element that complicates everything, was absolutely intentional to what the film was trying to do.
Right, because I can imagine this actually landing slightly different for a French audience, maybe more than slightly different, because if you're watching it if you're watching it as a native French speaker who maybe doesn't speak English, then the fact that she speaks English is this like distancing and alienating choice
Yeah.
where it's like she's a little bit of an other. She's a little bit she's not of the in group. You have to read everything she says, whereas the prosecutors, eloquent attacks are in your native language.
Yeah.
And then it lands totally the opposite when you're a native English speaker who doesn't speak French like me, where I have to read all of the prosecutor's text, and whatever she's saying is in English, which is easy. And she speaks English, perfectly. So you're like, yes, of course she's the more reasonable one. I don't have to read what she's saying. Like, I don't know how intentional that sort of, reversal was, but I thought that was a thing that I was considering quite a lot. Is like, man, I bet this is a totally different movie if you're a native French speaker.
Absolutely fantastic point. No, I agree with you, because I was kind of inspecting myself after I finished watching this movie and being like, okay, why do I feel like I'm siding with her a little bit more in this?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I feel that way? And I think it's that exact reason. It's that when I watch this movie, she's speaking my language. I can pay more attention to the intonation and the way she's saying things. Although sometimes, man, she's like, I feel, again, in America, if I were her defense attorney, I would be like, maybe you shouldn't testify.
Yeah, maybe you should stop talking now.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, and the rest is in French, which is a foreign language that I have to read, and yeah, it didn't occur to me that the opposite is true for the people that this movie was written for primarily. So I think you're absolutely right there, and that is totally alienating her. And then the moments where she's told, hey, speak in French, don't speak English, just like, you can't communicate the way you're most comfortable with here.
Right.
And that even becomes like a fight between the two of them, right? That's like, hey, we speak English here. She's like, of course you speak English. I speak German, you speak French. It's the universal language,
right?
of understanding. And we're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another. So I just said, she speaks English perfectly, and it's like, I interact with a lot of people who are not native English speakers, and I so I have occasion to notice that a lot of non-native English speakers speak better English than I do, right? because the English spoken by native English speakers is screwed up in all kinds of ways, and we hide all of this intentionality in our inflections in ways that are just so hard to catch. And so the fact that she's a German speaking English while it's like technically perfect English, it's a little bit flat. And this is not a critique of her acting. This is just a fact of what happens when you're trying to express yourself in a foreign language. You lose a little bit of that nuance, and it becomes a little bit opaque. Maybe sounds a little bit cagey, even though it's not intended to. Maybe sounds a little bit evasive, even though it's not intended to. And so I think that that's a super clever choice, is to not just have her be an American in France who's on trial, but have her be a German in France on trial speaking English. It really creates this like cloud of like inability to read her, and yet you're like always trying to read her, because that's like the whole movie hinges on that.
Totally, I completely agree. That's wonderful. And I think we haven't talked much about the direction yet, but we did mention that Justine Triet is nominated for Best Director, and I think she does a lot. There's a lot of choices here in how the camera moves, what the camera does to kind of add to the chaos and confusion. This is a camera that is she does handheld a lot, and it's not just in handheld. It's handheld that like it's almost as if the camera holder intentionally like trips over a desk leg. At times, and it'll just shake randomly. She'll do like dramatic rack zoom sometimes. It just adds to this feeling of you're kind of intruding a little bit. Like you're active in the scene, but again, I think we talked about this last week with Past Lives, where it was just like flat at a distance voyeur type. This is not like looking at people through a window. This is, I'm in the room and I shouldn't be here right now. And like the camera's like sneaking around and moving around and like shaking and like dramatically like reacting to things as if it's us in the room.
Yeah, I mean, during the courtroom scenes, I noticed there were bits where the entire frame would be occluded by like the head of the person, quote unquote, sitting in front of you in the uh, court.
Mhm.
And it gives you this sense of like, oh, I'm like sitting in the court watching this. Exactly as you said, it would give you a sense of space, and like you're one of these people. It made you identify with these characters sitting in the court watching, which, by the way, sometimes the camera shows them. Like there'll be some testimony happening and the camera will just cut to focus on some like old lady she's in the crowd. She's
Yeah.
looking really skeptical. Cuts to show some man who's looking thoughtful, and you're identified with these people. You're the audience who's sitting there having these emotional reactions, and then showing them, it causes you to reflect on yourself. You're like, oh yeah, the old lady's looking real suspicious there. I'm feeling kind of suspicious. That's me in the
Yeah.
movie. It's
Matt, where
very
was the
clever.
jury?
I don't know. This is what's funny is I think that like I don't even know whether they have a jury in the same sense we do, but I think the jury was like all the people sitting in the kind of horseshoe shaped seating area, with the exception
Next
of
to the judge?
next to the judge.
That's weird.
But then but I don't know. I don't actually understand how their court system works. Like I don't know if they have a jury of your peers type arrangement, or if this is like more like a grand jury or whatever you call it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's jury of peers, but they did reference a jury several times. Like,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the judge was the only one in that horseshoe like doing anything. So I guess it would make sense that the rest of them are the jury. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild, wild courtroom.
Yeah.
Once again, just the concept that you could have a witness on the witness stand and then just turn to the defendant and be like, "So, your reaction to this thing?"
Or like the cross
Are they
examination.
under oath? Do they have to answer? Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like it would just be the prosecutor and defense arguing with the witness at the same time, and then and then the defendant could just pipe in and be like, actually, and you're like, what is this? Is chaos.
What's going on? Yeah. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Our justice system's not perfect, Matt, but I feel like it's a little better than this. I don't know. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe this is a horrible misrepresentation of the way this the system works. But but as it's depicted here, it definitely makes you feel
I do not
horrible.
like it. I do not like the fact that if you write a book about murder, that can be entered as evidence against you in a murder trial.
Yeah.
I appreciated the line from the prosecutor or the defense attorney that was like, "What, is Stephen King a serial killer?"
Oh yeah, I love that.
I appreciated that line. Yeah.
And
it is absurd. It's absurd to bring someone's fictional novel as character evidence against them. No.
But what I love about that is he says that, and I chuckled, and then the prosecutor's rejoinder is, I don't know, has his wife turned up dead? And then you're like, and then for a second I was like, I don't even know if that's a good point or not. That might be a good point.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I love that because ultimately, we actually make a lot of decisions in life, like in real life, based on shit that wouldn't fly in a courtroom. Like you hear secondhand something that somebody said to somebody, and you're like, oh yeah, I like them less now and I trust them less now. Like we're constantly making these decisions. I'm sure we all have our private opinion on a million little questions of gossip and propriety in our personal lives and so forth that have no, like, if you were to go into a court and prove that person did the thing, you'd be like, there's no evidence. Somebody who I trust said that they heard this. And it's not like we even have the option of just like not living our life that way. Like we just have to live our life that way. And it's fun to confront that fact, actually. Just before I forget this, as I'm sort of doing my research while talking to you, the director was apparently very interested in the Amanda Knox case, which I don't know why I didn't think of that, because it has so many similarities to this, where you have I mean, in this case, it was an American woman vacationing in Italy who was not only arrested for this murder, that it made no sense that she could have committed this murder. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. But she was not only arrested, she was convicted.
Yeah.
And she spent 4 years in prison, and it just like it was absolutely just a disaster on every level of their court system. And it was one of these, like, the trials carried out in the court of public opinion type trials. And I don't even remember how she got out of prison, but she got out of prison
She got a second
eventually.
trial and they acquitted her. I think.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't remember exactly how that happened, but that
Yeah.
I know that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. But yeah, just a nightmare, right? It's a great sort of horror story to imagine that you're just traveling in a foreign country, minding your own business basically, and now
Yeah.
you're on trial for murder in a system that you don't understand and seems to make no sense and be strongly biased against you.
Yeah.
Very Kafkaesque, actually.
Well, I just love that idea, like that general concept, and I think that's the thing that probably attracted everyone to this project so much, is that like you're going through your everyday life and you're having the struggles that everyone has with career and relationships, and they've just gone through this terrible thing with their son, and then suddenly, without warning, this thing happens, and maybe she did it, maybe she didn't, but suddenly your marriage is on trial, right? Like suddenly
Right.
you have to stand in front of a room of people and explain the complicated intricacies of how you feel about the person that you've pledged to spend the rest of your life with. And like, how the fuck do you do that? Like, how do you do that in a way to make someone understand? Because it's one of the most complicated things in the world.
Yeah.
And there's no possible way you could do it. And that's why, I mean, that's why I hope that this is just a gross misrepresentation of the justice system in France. And really the point here is that it is, in essence, a trial in the court of public opinion. That this is just, I have to convince this room of people that what my relationship was with my husband, and
Yeah.
how I felt about him, and was I angry with him? Yeah. Was I disappointed in him? Yeah. Was I frustrated with him? Yeah. Yes, all the things. However, it doesn't mean I killed him.
Right.
And if those are the only pieces of evidence you have towards convicting me of killing him, well, that sure looks bad, doesn't it? But like, just it's a fascinating idea, and it is like one of the funniest lines to me, and I told this before, but lines to me in like our justice system is this concept of like the jury will disregard that last comment.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, what? No, they're not. I mean, like just like once it's out there, man, it's out there. Like, we're people. Like even you're trained as a jury to like only look at the evidence as presented, but that thing is in the back of your mind. Just like that thing that I would call complete conjecture, which is that she took his book idea and made a book out of it. Does it have anything to do with how he fell out of a window? No. But it does define who she is as a person, and it makes you like her a little bit less. And if you like someone a little bit less, maybe you think they're a little bit more capable of murder.
Yeah. Well, similarly, and I was really grappling with this because I can't even rationalize this, but like you said a minute ago, she says things that she absolutely shouldn't say, right?
Yes.
Like
yes.
she one of the things they ask her, I forget what the question was, but her response is like a marriage or a relationship is a kind of chaos. It's like a storm. She says something like that, and she's trying to articulate like there's you're trying to like pin this down with these brief 1 sentence descriptions of things that were actually like 8-month long running argument slash
Yeah.
just our living our lives, one thing happening after another. Maybe there's not even intent behind these things, and you're trying to summarize it and narrativize it. And she didn't say everything I just said there, but she's trying to convey this idea of a relationship as being chaotic, and you're like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like stop talking. Like you said, a U.S. defense attorney would never let her get on the stand and talk about how a relationship is chaos.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's what a woman says who murders her husband. But at the same time, But then the other part of my mind is like, well, that's just so honest. Like a woman who actually murders her husband would never get on the stand and say, yeah, sometimes a relationship is chaos and you just hate
Yeah.
the other person, because that would be like an incredibly damning thing to say. And then I'm like, wait a minute. But then if she's really smart, maybe she would say that just to cause me to have that reaction. And then I was like, oh my God,
Sure.
I've just realized that I've gone insane.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, for me watching the movie, it counted in her favor that she was willing to be honest about their relationship problems
Yeah.
instead of, I mean, she did try to lie a couple times at first because she was like, I don't want to admit that there were like fights, but she was trying to be honest about like, look, there was tension, there was conflict. All relationships have that. She was almost trying to justify that idea of like, my marriage wasn't bad, defensively. My marriage wasn't bad. All marriages are like this,
Yeah. Well, because no one wants to admit their marriage is bad. I mean, like
Right.
even though it so clearly was, you're having affairs. Like you like your husband is passive aggressively playing 50 Cent over and over again when you're getting interviewed, and yes, absolutely flirting with the woman that's interviewing you. Like
Right.
100%, she was doing that. Yeah. I mean, like a fun exercise is to like everyone listening to this right now, close your eyes and imagine that the last fight you had with your partner was recorded and is being played for 50 people. Explain it. Go.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
right.
holy shit. Like, no way. No way.
Yeah.
It's just like it's an impossibility, but it's like what the justice system demands in this case, and it's absurd. You talking about her, lying reminded me of like one of my favorite lines where I screamed at the TV. Which was when she said, I did. He basically asked her why'd she lied, and she said, because I was afraid it would make me look guilty. And the prosecutor's response is, as all guilty people say. And I just was like, you can't just say that. Like, you can't just say, you can't.
Innocent people say that too, dipshit. Come on. Yeah. Like,
I was like, why are you not screaming objection right now? Why are you not saying, hey, judge, yell at him for saying that kind of thing? You can't just throw a statement in court out like that. These
little bon mots being tossed out into the, it's like, they're being awarded style points. That's hilarious.
Speaking of the performances, I want to talk about Sandra Hüller a lot. She was phenomenal, but the prosecutor, that guy, oh man, he did a really good job of making me not like him.
Yeah, totally. I thought he was great. The defense attorney, he was also, that was a whole complicated thing on the side there, which I think added a lot of kind of interesting, weird complexity, where like he totally thought she was guilty the whole time, but was also in love with her the whole time, which made it even more like, talk about ambiguity. Like actually, I think that was maybe that's more accurate, is to say, much like we're never really made aware whether she's guilty or not. We never quite know, like, is he giving her that strange look because he thinks she killed her husband, or is it because he's totally in love with her and that's just how his face looks. I do, and the other thing to consider is that I think we can all agree that if somebody were playing that song on a loop that loud, it would be okay to kill them.
Oh yeah, I would totally push them out of a window.
Yeah,
especially if I'm trying to record my podcast.
Yeah. I mean,
no one has to worry. I live in a 1-story house. There's no windows to push my wife out of. It'll be totally fine.
Yeah, but this is the perfect use case for jury nullification, where we're like, she did kill her husband, but she should have.
Yeah, but come on.
So not guilty.
Yeah. I guess that's maybe my final question for you here, Matt. And I know it doesn't ultimately matter, and it's not the point of what the movie's trying to say. But do you think she did it?
Okay, so answer one is, I think the movie is intentionally ambiguous, and the movie intentionally does not contain the answer. But that being said, to actually answer your question, do I think she did it? I don't think she did it. And the reason, like, my personal justifications have to do with, number one, you just don't have any forensic evidence that says she did, like, at all. And they went over the house. They didn't find a a thing that she would have hit him with. It seems like it would have been very hard for her to actually shove him out that window. None of that made sense to me. Just on the pure forensic evidence side, I was like, this just doesn't add up at all. And then you also have this basically the story that the kid tells, where it's like, yeah, the father seemed to be suicidal. He seemed to have tried to kill himself before. And then on top of that, I think just her performance, while I did say several times that she was kind of, aloof and kind of distant and cold in some ways, much like Amanda Knox was accused of being in real life, it's like between the cracks of that, you just didn't see that human sign of duplicity and scheming and calculating. So he just seemed to be kind of a cold, emotionally distant person who was being wrongly accused of murder. And again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying like these are my perceptions of the film, and so you could have a totally different perception. And I'll ask you now, what do you think?
I think she's innocent. I agree with everything you said forensically. I think the thing that really got me specifically was like I think the son's testimony, but then one of the things the prosecutor said that I thought was actually a terrible argument, and like I'm surprised the defense attorney didn't strike back on, was this idea of like she was characterizing him as this like kind of weak, defeated person. And they're like, well, he didn't sound weak and defeated on the audio tape. What do you mean? He sounds like he's a strong person that's going to fight back for what he wants. And like my response to that would have been, yeah. And then he lost that argument. Like he lost, like nothing that he wanted in that argument was accomplished. Like he lost it. And so the next day he's lost. He like took his like final stand against his wife to try to get what he wants. He loses the argument, and then he's busy working and he hears her flirting with someone downstairs, and he's just like, fuck this. Fuck this. I'm done. I can easily write that narrative in my head. And is it right? Who knows? But like it's as right as any of the other narratives that the prosecution was building the entire time during this movie. So like I think Daniel says, I can see him based on the characterizations of these characters. I can see him as a type of person that has had enough and just decides to end it, more than I could see her, managing to smack this guy on the head and then dump him out of a window.
Yeah. And while I agree with you on all of that, it's like we become very conscious of the narrowness of the aperture of the film as a method for understanding these questions. We're totally at the mercy of what the film chooses to show us, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, there's no fact of the matter, right? There's no, even if the director were to like write down on a piece of paper, like, yes, she killed him. It's like, okay, that doesn't mean anything. This is the movie. These are the things we were shown. And based on those, this is the conclusion we come to. But it does make you think like, well, in a real life situation, you're just as prey to, subject to the things that you happen to see and happen to become aware of. And if there's some piece of evidence that they could have collected but didn't, and you never see it, it doesn't exist to you, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, I mean, I think that is why the ending is ambiguous. It's not just for funsies. It's because it forces you to a place where if you want to know how it turned out, you have to make the choice yourself, and in doing that, you kind of expose yourself to being at prey to the exact same things that everyone else in this movie is prey to. Drawing conclusions based on circumstantial, subjective information about a person. Yeah, 100%. One fun fact I read actually was that throughout the entire filming, Sandra Hüller like kept going to Justine Triet and was like, okay, but like, was she guilty? And she refused to tell her, right? So like, is it not only was not in the movie at all, but like she didn't even want her leading lady to know. And so that's great, because it means Hüller has to play this character with that uncertainty. Like she, the actor playing the character, also doesn't know if the character did it or not. And so she kind of has to play both and neither. And I think that is, in my opinion, that is part of what elevates her performance. Like fantastic performance. Like she's
Yeah.
so good. She's got her Oscar speech in the flashback sequences, but like
Yeah.
to everything you said, the way she talks, like that intentional, and I agree with you, intentional kind of overly neat, unrealistic English that makes her a little bit colder than uh, a person speaking in their native tongue would be.
Mhm. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
there, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there are certain, you know, maybe moments and maybe little shots in the movie where you see an expression on her face and you're like, ah, she's guilty, and then you change your mind a second later, and I think it's just like you're looking at Rorschach blots. You're projecting,
Mhm.
and I think it's genius. I think
It
that's
is.
why it's a Best Picture contender.
I agree. I totally agree. It is genius. It's a fun idea, and it takes like the entire movie for the genius of the movie, in my opinion, to be fully revealed to you
Mhm.
when you're watching that final sequence where, I think her son says, "I was afraid to come home," and she says, "I was afraid to have you come home," and it's like now these two people, having decided what their truths are, have to find a way to live now
Mhm.
together, and it's just like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my God. At least Snoop's okay. I was worried about poor Snoop for a while there.
Yeah, I thought they might have killed that. I did think they were going to kill Snoop. Actually,
He certainly looked super dead.
he looked very dead. I'm not entirely sure that pouring water sort of vaguely on the dog's mouth
Will
would
cause
do
it to throw up.
would do
Yeah,
anything.
I asked that same question too. I was like, is that
Like,
how you get a dog to pee? I have dogs. I don't never done that.
I mean, you can make a person vomit by forcing them to drink a bunch of water,
Yeah.
salt water, but drink and lightly spill over the dog's muzzle are not the same thing. And it has to be a lot of salt water. It has to be enough that you're like, this is for human, mind you. Maybe dogs are more sensitive. Dog looks super dead. Dog looks super dead to me. I think the dog is dead. I think this is an unreliable narrator. The dog is dead.
Fun fact: this movie won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and Snoop won the Palme Dog, which I didn't know was a thing.
I wasn't sure if you were joking.
I'm not. I'm not.
Snoop does great. I'm not even like, I was watching this movie. I was like, where'd this dog go to acting school?
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff to put on the dog, actually.
Yeah, all right. Play dead, but like not the way dogs normally play dead. Like really play dead.
Yeah, be dead. Yeah.
Stop breathing.
Oh my gosh. Anything else you wanted to say about Anatomy of a Fall? Really, really great movie.
Nope,
I agree with you. I don't think this is going to win Best Picture. I think it has an opportunity to win original screenplay, though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, maybe even something like best editing, possibly, just because I feel like the editing carries a lot of the load of keeping your attention where it's supposed to be. But
yeah, so normally I would say yes, but if we look at our best editing nominees, we have this, we have The Holdovers, we have Killers of the Flower Moon, we have Poor Things, and we have Oppenheimer. And let me tell you how editing awards are given out, Matt.
they're given
best
Oppenheimer.
editing. Best editing means most editing, and so it's going to be Oppenheimer.
Yeah, it's going to be Oppenheimer for
it's
sure.
Absolutely going to be Oppenheimer.
I thought that as soon as you said Oppenheimer. Yeah, I mean Oppenheimer is going to win everything, so
it certainly is.
Yeah.
I think one thing you wanted to mention briefly that we didn't talk about was the score.
Yeah. Well, so there's the PIMP song, which not only plays during the beginning of the movie, but then plays again when they play the recording of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And then other than that, you've got so this is all in story music, right? You've got the boy practicing piano, and he's practicing. I feel like I should know the piece, but I don't. But he's often practicing this very like aggressive staccato piano song, and he's practicing it badly, right? Like it's intentionally off, which makes it even more dissonant and jarring
Mhm.
and uncomfortable. So there's all like the movie is very frequently making these loud, discordant sonic assaults on you. Um, so that's not really the soundtrack per se, but I definitely thought like the movie's going out of its way to just annoy you with sound, basically make you uncomfortable. Maybe I should say not annoy you, but make you feel uncomfortable and tense with all that stuff.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I wanted you to talk about that because I didn't notice it, but then I think you mentioned it to me when we were talking, and I went back and watched some scenes, and yeah, it's totally there, and it does like it subconsciously I think works to put you in this state of uncertainty, of confusion, of discomfort
Hmm.
that the movie wants you to be in for sure.
Yep. Right.
Great movie, great movie. I like. Okay, we're 7 of 10 now, right? We've got 3 films to go. This is a really good crop of Best Picture nominees. Like,
Yeah.
I could say this is a person who has generally watched all of them, if not most of them, for the past 10 years or so. This is a really solid bunch. Like, even if these next 3 films are absolute shit, which I don't think they're going to be. Actually, I've seen one of them already, and I know it's not. So, this is a really, really, really good Best Picture year. Like, this is a good Oscars year, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have as much to compare against as you, but I have enjoyed all of these. Like, I think like my least favorite of these was still a movie that I enjoyed quite a lot. So,
Hmm.
um, in fact, I'd be hard pressed to even say like which one was my least favorite, which sort of indicates well, I
Maestro?
liked all of them actually. Should you just say Maestro?
Yes.
That's good. See, I'm not even gonna say one because I'm looking over the list and I'm like, uh, they're all good movies. They're all
Yeah.
good movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I think the Oscars, and rightfully so, got themselves into a position over the last 20 years or so where they've just kind of alienated the normal movie watcher, to the point where, like, my wife was telling me about a conversation she had with a coworker today where she was asking if we've been watching any TV shows and had any recommendations. And my wife is like, well, we're doing this thing for my husband, where we're watching one of the Best Picture nominees every week. You could do something like that. And her coworker's response was like, I don't know if like the Best Picture movies are for me, because
Uh,
there's just this stigma around the Academy Awards now. And the one thing I can say, like, yes, some of these films are definitely more like artsy than others, but like they've all just been like really well told, like, I think mass relatable pictures. I really
mm,
do. Like, there's not one in here that's like so far that's like artsy and pretentious to absurd degrees, right?
yeah,
I haven't seen that yet, and maybe we'll get there in these last few, but I just haven't seen it.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, last year, for reference, um, Triangle of Sadness and Tar
Yeah,
were
Tar is totally a movie where a normal moviegoer would be like, "What the
yeah.
fuck is
Well,
this thing?"
I
I
and
loved
I
Tar, by the way, for
so,
the record,
yeah, I didn't
and I
see
loved
Tar.
Triangle of Sadness too.
I saw Triangle of Sadness and I love Triangle of Sadness, but Triangle of Sadness is a super weird movie. I mean, it's maybe not as weird as Tar. I never saw Tar, so I shouldn't talk about
Tar's
Tar.
not weird. It's just like it's a tough hang.
Yeah, yeah. In any case, yes, I think the movies this year. Well, it's interesting. I don't want to get too bogged down in this, but I was going to say they're more accessible, but then I'm like, I don't know that. Um,
A
what
French courtroom procedural is
the
actually more accessible.
yeah, I don't know that a French courtroom procedural or a what was the one that I was just thinking of? The Korean language film basically
Mhm.
about star-crossed lovers that has no narrative um is is top of the pile for your average moviegoer.
No, but I think if they sat down and watched it, I think most people would enjoy that film.
I think most people probably would enjoy that film. I agree with that. Maybe.
All right. Well, I think we'll finish off with these next 3, and then we'll see where we stand from there. I think, like I said, I've seen Poor Things already, and have a lot of very positive things to say about that film. The other two, American Fiction and The Zone of Interest, are movies I haven't seen yet, so we'll see. I do think The Zone of Interest, which we will be watching for next week's episode, is one of the ones that could be like the most avant-garde, out there, average moviegoer alienating film. We'll see, but this is just based off the things I've heard about it.
I can't wait.
All right, so that is Anatomy of a Fall. 7 down, 3 to go. Let's do it.
Nice.
Doof.
Matt, before we go this week, we got to talk about the internet again.
I love talking about the internet.
So to fill you in and to fill listeners in, a new season of True Detective started about 6 weeks ago. It's called True Detective Night Country, 6 week, 6 episode, 6 week series. This show was not run by Nick Pizzolatto, who did the first 3 seasons. It was actually run by oh god, why am I forgetting her name? Issa Lopez, I think. Yes, Issa Lopez. I'm starting to doubt whether that's right. But no, yes, I was right. Oh, good. Yeah, Issa Lopez, who wrote and directed every single episode of this season. I like True Detective. Have you ever watched True Detective at all?
I have never watched a full episode of True Detective, although I have watched much of the first season via YouTube clips because that's how I roll.
Sure. So I really liked the first season. I did not like the second season very much at all. I thought the third season was okay. And I really enjoyed half of Issa Lopez's season. The first 3 episodes I thought were really fantastic. It's got Jodie Foster in it. She's excellent, as always. And then I thought the show kind of dove off a cliff from there. And I thought the final episode just didn't work at all for me. Still enough that I enjoyed my experience with the show, but just not the best for me. But a thing happened, Matt. A thing happened where there was a collection of the True Detective audience that were diehard True Detective season 1 fans, and were very, very mad about this season of television because it set about to almost do things in a way that was like the opposite of True Detective. Like True Detective is about 2 male detectives. This season was about 2 female detectives. It was a very male centric type thing. I think even the clips of season 1 that you've seen, I think you probably agree to me. This is a very male centric point of view. Issa Lopez tried to talk about her experiences, and it did something more female centric, and it pissed a lot of stupid people off. It also pissed Nick Pizzolatto off, by the way, because he, on the night of the finale, he took to Instagram and started reposting stories of people being very mean to the show, which is like a really shitty thing to do.
Not super classy.
Especially when he's still an executive producer of the show and gets money for every, like, if you were really like, as like an artist, like offended that they took this thing you created and they ruined it, like if you were really like that offended and pissed off about it, give the money back and take your name off the show.
Right.
But he's not going to do that. He's going to collect those checks and also be a crybaby on Instagram. So not a good look for him. But I think he was echoing a lot of the sentiment that certain people were seeing. The reason I want to talk to you about this, it's not because I care about stupid trolls on the internet, but a thing happened, which is because some of the worst people were being shitty about this show. A thing happened where it was like people started posting about, oh, well, notice the people that don't like the show versus the people that do like the show. And then it became a thing where, like, if you don't like the show, you hate women. And if you do like the show, you're on the good team. And it just was this kind of flattening, and it just became stupid. And it really pissed me off. It really pissed me off because it's like, it just reflected to me how we take art and just reduce it to a binary of what side are you on? Are you on the good side or are you on the bad side? And it's like, I didn't think this was a good show. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts where the people had very nuanced, wonderful arguments for why it was a good show, and nuanced, wonderful arguments for why the show failed in the final episode. And yet the discourse is one of notice a trend amongst the people that don't like the show,
Yeah.
and it's just like, what are we doing? What are we
Yeah.
doing here?
Right. Just compress everything down to the culture war axis.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I get annoyed when people do that too. I personally feel like I've seen less of that over time. And so you telling me about it, I'm actually maybe a little bit less annoyed than I would be, than I would have been, a while ago, just because I'm like, yeah, people still be doing that. But
Yeah.
I feel like the move there is now so like obvious and like gauche, basically, that you're just like, everybody rolls their eyes now, where or rather I should say, it used to be that like 40% of people would roll their eyes and that's not enough, but now like 90% of people roll their eyes. And so the 10% of people who still think this works and still thinks this makes them look cool are like doing it to each other, and everybody else is just kind of like sitting
Yeah.
there looking, I've always thought one of the problems with social media is that you can't see the faces of all of the people who are reading your tweet and being like, you fucking idiot, like, and not responding, crucially.
Yeah.
Because if you could, you'd probably not say as many things on Twitter in general.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've come to a conclusion about people based on how I see people interact with social media.
Uh-huh.
I think, we talk about how information is power, and like having access to more information is good. I don't think our brains are built to have access to all this information.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens a lot with Twitter, and I see myself do it all the time, so I'm not separating myself from this problem, is you see one person say one thing and you decide that person is representative of a great swath of people that are all agreeing to this certain thing, or representative of a cultural movement in general. And it's like, we don't know how to file things.
Yeah.
It's like we're so ready to pattern match and to group and to divide. It's just, we can't handle just, oh, that was just some dumb guy that just said one stupid thing and 90% of people disagree with that, but they will disagree silently. And so,
Right.
like, you see it all the time with, like, you'll see someone post something and then someone posts something else that like contradicts what the first person posted, and it'd be like, look, they're hypocrites. And it's like, those were two different people. Like, you can't, they're not all part of the same group. They don't have the same belief system. Like,
Uh-huh.
we just want one thing to represent an entire group of people's beliefs.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and I felt myself doing that this week, and I'm even kind of doing it just by complaining to you about it. But like, I was literally listening to a podcast in which two people were having a wonderful, very well done, nuanced conversation about exactly why episode 6 of the show didn't work for them. And at the same time, I was reading Twitter and watching people be like, oh, notice the people that don't like the show, and getting mad at them for feeling that way. And I'm like, but I'm listening to people like, this doesn't exist. What this person is tweeting about doesn't actually exist, because I'm literally right now listening to people having a nuanced conversation and it being okay for them not to like a show. And it's just, it's so fucked, man. It's so fucked. It's just like, it makes me sad, because like, like, if you love a show, if you hate a show, like there's always fascinating things to talk about in the why of it. And we just reduce it, as you said, to culture war. We reduce it to teams. We reduce it to, are you good or bad? Like, I watched the same thing happen with Star Wars The Last Jedi, right? Like, this is a movie that like the worst people hated, and therefore, to show that I'm not those people, I gotta really love. And I liked that movie. I liked The Last Jedi a whole lot. But I watch people like hold this movie up as if it was like the second coming of Christ. And I'm like, it's good.
Yeah.
It's not like, but you have to like, I not only do I have to like it to signal where I am on this thing, but I have to love it. I have to call it the best movie ever. And look, there's people like that might actually legitimately think it's the best movie ever. It's just, I just see these things happen, and it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it's demoralizing. Yeah, I like what you
Yeah.
said a second ago about like, um, we 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 are just aren't equipped to handle social media. Like you said, we're not meant to get this much information, and like in truth, the information we think we're getting is like as if you were, hanging out with the tribe, and this person like walked up to the campfire and said, Lord of the Rings sucks. And then nobody argued with them. You'd be like, I'm gonna fight this guy. Like I have to fight this guy because nobody's saying anything, and he's gonna sway the tribe to the wrong. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. What happened is there's 7, 8, or 9, or however many billion people there are now. One loses track, and one of them said this stupid thing, and you don't have to. This is meaningless, but it's very, very hard for you to actually make it, internalize that it's meaningless. It's
Yeah.
almost impossible to internalize that it's meaningless.
Yeah. Yep.
I think I told you this, and it's not that this has solved the problem for me, but it's helped me to just unfollow or mute or block, depending on the severity, people who say stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
Like not even like, harmful things, just like, oh, that like you that's that makes me annoyed at how dumb it is, and therefore I never want to see anything from you again. And that reduces, first of all, if you're following somebody who's reliably retweeting dumb takes into your feed, that you're just punching yourself in the face effectively. So you can really clean up your feed by just unfollowing or muting or whatever the kinds of people who will do that specific thing. And then, that's probably the 80-20 solution right there, is just don't be following anybody who does that stuff. And I always use the, following feed, not the for you feed personally. So,
Yeah, but
helps me.
I agree, because the central problem here is this fucking for you feed that just feeds me this stuff.
Yeah.
Because it knows I'm gonna get mad at it, and because that drives it's fucking evil algorithms know that they're gonna piss me off, and pissing me off drives responding to him, and it just so they happen more, and yeah, it's I hate it, but I try to do the following one, and then it switches back. And I don't notice it switches back, and then suddenly I'm reading a tweet, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even. Who is this? Who is this person? And what are they doing in my feed?
Yeah,
I hate it. I need to just get off it. Like, we've had like 30 conversations about social media over the course of this podcast, and the conclusion is always, I just need to not be on it anymore. And then I continue to be on it. But
yeah,
I am very sad about the way we talk about TV and art now, where it has to be a signifier of which tribe you're in. Your response, not only is your response to the art have to be a signifier of which tribe you're in, but the art itself must be a signifier of the only good art is art that signifies which tribe it belongs in, and if it doesn't do that, it is lacking in some way.
Yeah, I find that incredibly boring.
And I agree.
I mean, I think that's the one thing you may notice about the way that I talk about movies is I never analyze them that way ever.
Yeah.
And it's not even because I'm like trying not to. It's just like that holds absolutely no interest to me.
Yeah. And by the way, that's not to say like what we're not arguing that art isn't political, right? We're just arguing that like analyzing it through the lens of, does this align with my personal politics?
Right.
And therefore I'm allowed to like it is not what I'm interested in at all.
The quality is not a function of the politics. The politics are just a thing about the art that you can discuss.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm frustrated, but hey, here's the good news. This was the most watched season of True Detective ever. These 6 episodes.
Okay. And
HBO has greenlit a season 5 with Issa Lopez back to showrun. So suck it, Nick Pizzolatto.
Yeah, idiot.
I think actually the bigger problem here in my mind, and I know we talked about the stupid internet people for longer, but like, if you're a professional working in Hollywood, like, don't shit where you eat, man. Don't like that's the dumbest thing you could possibly do. Like, I totally understand like being a person who is like immensely protective of this thing that you created, and that he created this thing, True Detective. It was his baby. He made it. He brought it to life. He loved it. And then he sold it to HBO, and they took it, and then they gave it to someone else, and you have to watch someone else do things that you don't like. But you got to shut the fuck up about that. You can't talk about that publicly. Like you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's part, like if you and I went into the movie making industry tomorrow, we would have to stop the show, just because like you can't do that. Like you can't, once they become your peers, you can't critique them publicly. Like you don't do that. That's not how it works in the industry.
Yeah. It also strikes me as being particularly inappropriate for a show like True Detective, where it's not like, you know, Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or something, where it's like if someone were to take over the show halfway through and then drive it into the ditch, then the original creator would have some artistic leg to stand on and being like, that's not what I intended. But True Detective is like an anthology series.
Yeah.
Where these characters and this narrative has nothing to do with whatever Pizzolatto invented for season 1 and 2 of True Detective. It's just it's just a label.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm like, dude, like, chill out. It seems I know nothing about this drama, but you telling me this made me like him less. So
yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I think it's interesting because, you know, Issa Lopez said specifically that she loves season 1 of True Detective, and she was trying to make a thing that was not inspired by excuse me, but like paid homage to season 1 of True Detective. And it's a little weird because she wrote this story called Night Country as its own like independent story. Like she just wrote this she had this idea and she wrote this story for the show. And then later HBO approached her and said, "Hey, we're looking at doing more seasons of True Detective. Do you have anything?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I have this." And they're like, "Yeah, we like it. Can you change it a little bit to fit in to the True Detective thing a little bit more?" She's like, "Yeah, sure." And she did that. Which is, I mean, it's different. Like it's weird. It is why it's like, it is very different from True Detective in a lot of ways. And I think it's very similar to True Detective in a lot of ways. Again, like I didn't like the show overall. Like I didn't think it worked in the end. But there's a lot of parts of it I did like, and I'm kind of happy for her to get more, like to take another shot at this and maybe start from the ground up on a show that's meant to have the True Detective name versus, you know, kind of squeezing something into a True Detective thing after the fact. Could be do something interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds interesting. I mean, you know, I know nothing about this, but the way you're describing it sounds interesting.
Yeah. So that's the internet. Everyone get off Twitter. Just do it. It's not even called Twitter anymore. It's easy. Just
I am off Twitter. I'm on X now. So
I do think like the For You thing, it's awful. It's just really awful.
Yeah, I never. If it ever switches over to it, I immediately react as if I've burned my hand on the stove and switch back. It's much. I mean, honestly, I used to. You used to hear me say roughly monthly, like, "God, I need to get off Twitter," and I don't think you've heard that from me in a while, because I think I've actually like figured out how to use it in a way that isn't horribly toxic for me.
That's good. I'm happy for you.
Doesn't mean I recommend other people use it, but I feel less like bad about it now. So yeah.
Can I just once again reiterate that the change they made to make it so the title of the article not appearing in the embed image thing was a really dumb one, and now they've gone back and re-added it, but in like a much uglier way.
Yeah,
I don't understand why.
I don't know. I don't understand any of their choices, but you know, it's okay, man. Do the day and let the day do you.
That's the perfect way to end. That's all we had for you guys this week. Should we explain where that came from? Or
no.
Yeah, okay. If you have any opinions on anything we talked about today on True Detective Season 4, on Anatomy of a Fall, or just, you know, Twitter, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com. Not on Twitter, because we don't go there anymore. You can go to Reddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. You can also, Matt, I think if you're listening to this the day it came out, the 23rd of February, Matt and I are going to appear on a live stream tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time over on, I think they're, I forgot to ask them. I think they stream on YouTube. I don't know. It's called Brothers and Booze. And if you head to our Twitter, which I know I said I wouldn't use, but it's there, you can find a link to that. We're going to be talking about Stephen King for a couple hours. We got invited to go on this live stream and just have some drinks, chat about Stephen King. And so we're going to be doing that on the 23rd at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to hang out with us as we chat with those guys about Stephen King, please do so.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. If you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and check out all of the available bonus levels. There's a bunch of bonus podcasts we have, the ability to vote and things, just a whole bunch of cool stuff we're doing over there. So check it out. You can help us out, help us produce these shows, and get lots of cool stuff too.
Yeah. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, Matt, that they do this thing where if they don't get a new review before each week's episode, they subject their listeners to one of them having to talk about some inane, stupid topic that no one else cares about.
Okay.
In this case, it's a movie podcast, and one of the hosts is playing Marvel Snap. So if they don't get a review, he has to... He talks about Marvel Snap for 15 minutes and they all have to listen to it. So should we institute something like that?
Yeah, we should. Except I don't have any opinions that are uninteresting, so it'd be hard.
That's true. That's our problem. Where everything we say is interesting. So
yeah.
I don't know. We'll figure something out. The point is, leave us ratings and reviews, please.
Sounds good.
All right, folks, that is it this week. Next week, we will do our 8th film in this ongoing series. We're going to be talking about The Zone of Interest. I've heard a lot of things about this movie, Matt, and I'm cautiously optimistic about it. So we'll figure it out next week.
I heard nothing about it, but the title sounds really cool. So,
Yeah, there's like a zone and it's interesting.
I'm judging the book by its cover. Yeah, right. It's basically a book titled "This is Interesting." And I'm like, oh, that looks interesting.
We're going to make a movie and just call it The Good Movie.
Sounds good. It'll be 90 minutes long.
Yeah. It's a 90-minute film's first film. This is The Good Movie. All right. We'll see you folks next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.